This is Laugh or Death, hosted by keynote speaker Paul Ozenkup.
Inc. magazine calls John Livesay the pitch whisperer. As a sales keynote speaker, he shows company sales teams how to turn mundane case studies into compelling case stories so that they win more new business. From his award-winning career at Condé Nast, he shares the lessons he learned that turn sales teams into revenue rock stars. And his TEDx talk, Be the Lifeguard of Your Own Life, has over 1 million views. He's the author of 4 books, including the most recent, which is called The Sale is the Tale. John, stoked to have you here.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, wonderful to finally get to meet you in person. I've got to follow you a little bit online and see what you're up to, and it sounds like you've got a lot of great stories. I want to start off by asking our standard first question of the podcast for you to tell us something weird about you that makes you happy, or something weird that's unique that you love.
Oh, well, I know what makes me happy, and I think it's a little weird, is that my idea of fun is going to New York and trying to squeeze in 3 to 4 Broadway shows in one weekend. So I'll get there in time to see a Friday night show, Saturday matinee, Saturday night, and Sunday matinee. I line up which shows I want to see, and I try to see them before the Tony Awards. And I think most people think that's too many shows in one weekend, but for me, it's a little weird, but it makes me happy because it's all the great storytelling and usually really immersive.
That's a skill in itself to be able to time it out to fit that many shows into. That's a lot of shows in one weekend. I mean, when the last time I was in New York, I went and saw Hell's Kitchen, which was awesome, by the way. But I spent more time standing in the discount ticket than I did. And I'm like, what am I doing with my time here in New York? Why wouldn't you just pay? Like, it was just such a, like, when I was done thinking back, like, this is not the way to do it. I need to get your notes for next time and be like, all right, how do I get more shows in? What's one of your favorite shows?
I really enjoyed the recent production of Sunset Boulevard. That was originally a movie with Gloria Swanson, playing this aging actress, and she was only 50. And they thought, oh, God, she's 80. But they treated her like she was 80 in terms of that. And then I saw, Glenn Close do it. But this recent version with Nicole, who won the Tony for it, was really stripped down bare bones. And they had a camera on stage as if she was in the movie. And then what I thought was really clever was they had a young actress who was supposed to be, and really is in real life, 17, 18 years old, which is when that character was in silent movies. And there's Nicole in her 40s looking great, body fit and everything, but she's got crow's feet, normal. Right. But they would do a close-up of her face with that camera on stage. And she's singing about, nothing has changed. I'm still got it. And then they cut to the actress who's really 17. And the contrast, and just to see how delusional the character was, that she still looked like that. And of course, nobody looks like they did when they were 17, when they're in their 40s or 50s. So I thought that was and then they had somebody outside at the beginning of Act 2 in Times Square starting to sing and walking backwards, and the number of people filming that and crowd control. And then the door to the theater opens and you see what you just saw on camera in real life, and he continues the song as he gets up on stage. I thought that was really immersive and dramatic.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, now I know what show I need to go see. That's cool. There's something about live theater, too, that is just so different than even watching a great, compelling movie. Like when people are moving you in person and those things are happening live, like in real time. There is something so cool about that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
So, okay, so you, your career, you started out in sales and like advertising, right? At Condé Nast. I'm curious just how you went from what you did before to now the pitch whisper, teaching people how to leverage storytelling. So take me through that journey just a little bit.
Sure. Well, when I was at Condé Nast selling advertising to car companies and fashion companies and tech companies, I wrote my first book. And the publisher of the magazine at the time said, oh, we'll throw you a book party. Oh, how great. And then we said to some of the advertisers like Jaguar, if you run your ad in this upscale fashion magazine, people can afford a Jaguar. They'd see the ad and put her on their list of cars to go test drive. And as added value, the magazine bought copies of my book. And then I gave talks to the sales team on how to sell to the luxury market, not take rejection personally, some of the things that were in my first book. And that's really what launched my speaking career. Is I started speaking to our advertisers' sales teams, and then I started getting requests to speak to other sales teams that weren't advertising in the magazine, and then that's how I transitioned from selling advertising to speaking to sales teams because I've been in their shoes.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of my favorite things that you do, and I've heard you talk on some other podcasts and stuff about, helping people with their storytelling and with their pitches, and you've even helped people like win pitch contests because of the way they've been able to just it's not like you helped them develop their product, but you just helped them develop their story about who they are. Can you give an example of some of your favorites, like some stories that people had that you're like, this is what you should be telling, rather than like, here's how many people we've served?
Yes. Well, Olympus, the camera company, hired me to be a sales keynote speaker on storytelling at their kickoff meeting. And they said, one of the challenges we have is we have this equipment that makes surgeries go 30% faster. And we tell a doctor that, and they're like, okay, they don't seem to be moved to buy. And I said, because people buy emotionally and then back it up with logic. So I asked some questions and helped them develop this case story that totally transformed their results. Imagine how happy Dr. Higgins was 6 months ago down at Long Beach Memorial when he could go out to the patient's family an hour earlier than expected. And if you've ever waited for somebody you love to come out of surgery, you know every minute feels like an hour. Mm-hmm. And the doctor comes out and says, good news, the scope shows they don't have cancer, they're going to be fine. And then he turned to the rep and said, this is why I became a doctor, for moments like this. Now that rep tells that story to another doctor at another hospital, and that doctor sees themselves in that story and says, you know what, that's why I became a doctor. I want your equipment too. So that's an example of taking data 30% faster. And I said, what does that even mean? Well, the surgeries are usually 3 hours. With this, it's 2 hours. Okay, so we're saving an hour. Then we made a list of questions. Who benefits from that hour? Well, the hospital can make more money. They're squeezing in an extra surgery. The doctors and nurses are on their feet an hour less. And then I said, well, what about the patient's family? The waiting. And they go, oh, not only are we not telling stories, we're telling 30% faster. It never occurred to us to include the patient's family in a story. And the moment we did that, and you see how I pulled you into the story by saying, if you've ever waited for someone you love, if you have, it's torture, because I've been through that. But even if you haven't, you can put yourself in that story and go, get that Whitfield, wondering how they're going to do. So that's how I help them turn a stat into a story that tugs at heartstrings. And more importantly, people see themselves in. And that's the secret.
Oh, I love that. And just boiling really any product and any job down to the more human part of it. Because even if that doctor feels like they can slow down for a second, they're probably not going to spend 30% more time with that family than they would have. But if they spent an extra minute being empathetic with that family and talking about how things went or whatever, then, oh man, that connects them more to what they do. It makes the family feel better, probably raises the overall patient satisfaction scores of the hospital. So it's such a win-win. That's so smart to be able to tap into, like, here's the emotional value that this product is creating. There was another story that I remember hearing you talk about, a young man that you helped win a contest, and he was like, I don't really know if I have a story. But then he told you about how he grew up and got put naked in the rainforest or something.
Yes. Yeah, in his culture, that's the rite of passage into manhood. And they drop you off, and you got to survive for 2 weeks in the jungle on your own.
2 weeks.
They give you some training. And when he told that story to potential investors, they said, we're putting our money on you, because what we're looking for is we're investing in you more than your idea. And we want someone who's got grit and tenacity. And if you can survive that, and also that story makes you really memorable and unique, that's who we think has the best chance of making this idea come to life.
That's so cool. Yeah, and you're exactly right, because the product is either viable or helpful to humanity, or the people think that it's a good investment one way or another, or it's not. It's just whether or not they're going to go with you or somebody else, probably. And so the fact that you can, get those things like, hey, this guy's been through a lot. He's got a great story. He's got a lot of resilience. And if he can survive 2 weeks in the rainforest, then he can get through anything we're going to put him through.
Exactly.
The
And it's the difference between saying I'm someone with grit and tenacity and resilience and showing it in a story. And that's what I'm constantly teaching people. Don't tell people you're excited to be here. That's a cliche thing to say. Everybody says it. It doesn't move the needle. And oh, by the way, it's not about you being excited. Show you're passionate about something and then tell a story of tenacity, whatever the audience is concerned, or in the case of investors, they want a founder with tenacity and grit and an example of doing it and not giving up. And in the case of Olympus, they're trying to convince doctors to buy something. And it's an emotional decision, especially if you tie it to the purpose of why they became a doctor in the first place. Then it's much easier for them to remember that story and want that feeling.
Mm-hmm. What about somebody who is listening right now who's like, well, I'm not in sales, or I don't have a new business that I'm pitching or anything. I don't have a startup. And I would argue that there's so much in life that is a pitch, whether it's a huge presentation that you're doing at work next week or a job interview or whatever. So how can the average person, I guess, leverage like good storytelling to help themselves?
I think you're right, Paul. We all have to sell ourselves almost all the time. The concept that, I'll just do good work and I'll get noticed and I'll get promoted doesn't really fly anymore. It's too many people, and you have to, now you're having to compete with AI being able to do something. So what you bring to your job to get promoted, to get a raise, the best people who get a raise most likely are the ones that have a story and not just a bunch of facts of, here's all the things I did. Instead, it's a story of impact and transformation, of how it elevated not just the department, but ideally the whole company, whether it's attracting and retaining top talent. You're solving some kind of problem, and every good story, the stakes have to be high. Mm-hmm. And when the stakes are high, that's what makes us care about it. So the more you can figure out what impact am I making in my job that merits a raise or a promotion, then what's at stake if I didn't do my job? And then I went above and beyond my job description that has deserved more than the average raise. Then you have a story to tell when it's time for them to do your review that is way more memorable, because the better storytelling you are, the more memorable you become. People forget facts after you leave the room, but our brain files storytelling in a different part. For example, if I ask you, Paul, tell me the lyrics to your favorite song, you could probably do it.
Right.
But if I said, tell me the first page of your favorite book, probably not.
Yeah, that's a good.
Storytelling lives where the music part lives.
Yeah.
So it's filed differently.
Or even like if you asked me to give you the lyrics of my favorite song, and I could recite those lyrics. Mm-hmm. That's not that exciting of a conversation, or it's not going to be that memorable for you, particularly if you don't know the song. But if I were to tell you, I remember where I was when I was singing this song and how I felt because I was just coming back from, seeing my best friend, or it was as we were driving away from our wedding or whatever, then that story about my favorite song has so much more impact than just the words that are in it. Yeah.
And if you're at all self-deprecating in your story and can infuse a little bit of humor, then people really relate to you. Phrases like, if you're anything like me, I tell the story of, I read this research that, taking a cold shower fights fat, reduces inflammation, fights off of depression, but it fights fat. I'm like, that's enough of a reason for me to take a cold shower. So I'm taking cold showers 3 times a day thinking, okay, I'm waiting for that fat to melt. I don't have to work out anymore. That didn't really work. So that's an example of self-deprecating.
Yeah. That's like, I'm trying, I'm the same. I'm like trying to, like, whatever I can do, especially as I get older, it's like so hard. It's like, cold showers are supposed to help you, trim fat, lose weight, speed up your metabolism. And so, as you can tell, I love a hot shower.
Yeah, it's the opposite. Yeah. I'm not spending a lot of time in those cold showers. But, there's different ways to test. What's the funniest way to tell that story? Mm-hmm. Is it start with fights fat, burns depression, reduces inflammation, or wait for that to be the ending take? So I've experimented with it, and for me, I get the biggest laugh when I put it first, because my punchline is, "It had me at Fights Fat."
I love that you play with that. I think that's an under appreciated part about good humor and comedy is how much work it takes and how much like beta testing any one joke or
Yes.
anecdote or story
Yeah.
takes. And you're right, because some bits it's better to set up at the beginning and then have your last the last thing you say be the funniest part. I have a joke that I wrote a long time ago about my wife is a veterinarian, and so sometimes when I'm speaking to healthcare organizations, I talk about how, like, being married to a veterinary doctor is probably very similar to being married to an MD. The only difference is when I get sick, how she takes my temperature.
Yeah.
And that always gets a pretty good laugh. But when I first wrote that and came up with that, I said, the only difference is how she takes my temperature when I'm sick. And the how she takes my temperature is the funniest part.
Right.
So I don't want to keep talking after I say that.
No.
So I move that to the
Lift
end
it.
to, like, when I get sick, how she takes my temperature, then everyone can laugh and
And
I'm
they
not going to
visualize
step
it,
on my
yeah.
laugh. Yeah. So, like, that, I love that kind of stuff. Do you coach people, like, when they're doing pitches and you're coaching people on, creative storytelling and really trying to hone in on those pitches? Do you coach them at all with, like, hey, let's add some humor here, or here's how you might be able to make that a little bit more funny or self-deprecating?
Well, yes, because the majority of the audiences I'm speaking to now as a keynote speaker are tech and healthcare audiences. One of the unspoken criteria when people say this is how we're going to decide who to hire or what product to buy is, are you fun to work with?
Right.
And so sometimes I'll ask people. I was coaching a team who was pitching to redesign a horse ranch. And I said, "Do you have any pictures of you on a ranch when you were a kid that we could put on the team slide?" "Oh, yeah." Or I was coaching another team pitching to design a university student housing. I said, "Can you dig up the pictures of you when you were a student
Oh,
and make that your
perfect.
team?" And maybe wear the colors of the school. Everyone in the team is showing up in the school colors. And so that kind of, like, oh, you've got some creativity and playfulness here, brings it to life.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, if there's any kind of thinking back to when you were a freshman in college and, I remember living in the residence halls and what that was like.
Yes.
And if anyone has a good story about that, it's like, oh, it's just humanizing. Because I mean, even when I'm talking with organizations about creating a more fun environment to work in, that same tip that you have about, pictures of you when you were a kid, like, that's a great thing to have in a public area that clients and customers can see. Like, oh, these are the actual people who
Yes.
work here, and you can even have a guess which kid is which adult or whatever. That
Right. Yes.
it all
Your own story of origin is a wonderful exercise I've done with people where they bring their favorite book from childhood and pictures of themselves from a kid, and everybody has to guess who's who and what's the favorite book.
and because you help people create kind of their origin story, right? Like,
Yes.
that's an important part of sales or a pitch. Is
Yes,
like,
I feel
here's
so.
who I am.
Because the reason it's important, Paul, is people want to know who you are. Otherwise, it's transactional. So if you have, do I trust you? Do I like you? Like the heart thing. And most importantly, is what you're saying going to work for me? And everybody wants to have a sense that you didn't just fall into what you're doing, that there was some intention behind it. Well, I couldn't become a doctor, so now I sell medical equipment. That's not the story of origin people want to hear. They want to hear that you always liked tinkering with Legos and you became an architect or something. So that ability to personalize your story of origin, and then here's the real secret, ask your clients how they got into what they're doing. That's way more bonding than talking about sports and the weather as a rapport building thing. But if you start with yours first and then they say, oh, well, my dad was a lawyer or accountant or whatever it is. So it's kind of the family business. Oh, interesting. Or I was just always good with numbers, so I love doing this. Doesn't feel like work. So asking people their own story of origin and having your own ready separates you from just the resume.
Yeah, and people can see themselves or maybe someone they know in you. Like, oh, that's so relatable. that was the same as me. I was always putting things together, and that's why I became interested in architecture. Yeah, that's anything you can do to have people relate with you. That's such a smart tool. What's your origin story? I'm sure you have like a lot of go-to stories that you use in your talks or as examples. What's kind of one of your origin stories that you use or tell?
One of my favorite origin stories was when I was about 10 years old. I went from wearing husky-sized pants to being on the swim team. And it was the first sport that I ever really excelled at. I was not good with hand-eye coordination and catching a ball, throwing a ball, and none of that was for me. But the swimming thing was like, oh, I found my thing. And then I became a lifeguard. And I remember, you wore zinc oxide and had a whistle around your neck and felt like you were cool. But mostly you just blew the whistle at kids saying, don't run on the wet cement. But one day,
hey, walk. Yeah.
Yeah, this girl was looking down at the high dive, and I go, oh boy, it's probably her first time. And she finally got the nerve to jump off, and then I start counting how many seconds she's underwater. I'm like, up 4 seconds, 5, it's like 2 seconds too long. Finally, she gets up, she's flailing and coughing. And I went, even if I threw her a buoy, she wouldn't even see it. She's so panicked. So I dove off, pulled her to the side, and though she was coughing and choking, I knew she was going to be okay. And that lesson to not panic and stay calm when something bad happens has stayed with me my entire career, including when I got laid off from Condé Nast during the 2008 mortgage crisis. Mm-hmm. I was the person that said, well, they need you out in 24 hours. I said, but don't you need a status report of where ads should be and the upcoming issues? They go, well, that'd be great, but everyone else is so pissed off, they're storming out. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I remember my lifeguard training, even though I was devastated about being laid off, I didn't panic. And I stayed calm, and that's what allowed them to rehire me 2 years later as a boomerang employee because of the way I left. And the way I left because I used to be a lifeguard. So that's the through line of my story, Warger.
Well, and I also like how there's the stay calm in the lifeguard story, and it really resonates with if you get laid off or if things don't go well for whatever reason at an employer. Yeah. It's not like the same type of instant acute chaos that like someone drowning in front of you could be, but that emotional trigger that probably everyone was feeling,
your brain gets hijacked.
It could then cause you to screw this place, I'm out of here, and whatever, but the ability to be able to stay calm amidst all of those competing emotions and go, what's best for me long term is to leave on a good foot.
And it wasn't even that. It was that I cared about my clients. I'd been there 13 years, and I'd seen them get married and have kids, and I was thinking about my clients, not my own career, by choosing to take care of them as best I could.
Staying grounded and going, well, all these people are going to be lost if we don't at least give you a warm handoff here. Yeah, that's a great that's a great story. What are there any times in your life? I mean, you talked about getting laid off. Are there any difficult times that you've gone through in your life where you felt like, wow, humor really showed up in a way that I didn't think it was going to, or we actually laughed through this situation and I was surprised, or that humor helped you through any difficult times?
Yes. Well, I remember talking about AI uncovering paintings under paintings from the 1940s when Picasso was around. And they used to paint over their paintings during the war because there was a shortage of canvases. And I was talking to my friend, I said, imagine the urge to create being so strong that you would paint over your masterpiece. And multiple times, like you're looking at the fifth one I did, and AI would show multiple paintings underneath that. So when I got divorced, I was pretty devastated. And my friend said, I guess it's time to paint over that masterpiece story you had of how your life is going to go. And it took that really sad, stressful moment, and we could laugh about it because we had that frame of reference of, oh, right, my life is a masterpiece, and this isn't the story I thought it was going to be, but I'm just going to paint over it. And it made us laugh, and it made me have an analogy of, oh, right, I can reinvent myself.
Oh, I love that. That is such a cool analogy. And what I like about it, too, is all of the original work and part of that first masterpiece is still there.
Still there.
Yeah, you've just kind of added to it, stacked more on top of it, and then creating new masterpieces, and who knows, there could be more and more to come. That's such a really cool analogy. How would you advise somebody like how to develop their story or get good at storytelling or create their own compelling origin story?
Well, I think the origin story, the best thing is to start with who inspired you. Parent, teacher, celebrity. Figure out that is your starting point. And then make sure that's what I call 3 C's. Is it clear? Don't use a bunch of acronyms. Is it concise? Make it short so people can remember and repeat it. And most importantly, is it compelling? Do people feel something when they hear your story of origin? And that usually involves making sure the stakes are high. Because if the stakes aren't high in a story, we don't care about what's happening. So if you have that little checklist, clear, concise, compelling, and run it by your friends and say, did you understand this? Oh, yeah, it was clear. Or not really, you lost me here. Do you think it could be a little more concise? And you go, God, yes. Right? Oh, okay. And then, did you feel anything? So if you have that as a checklist, that's a great way to make sure your story's as strong as it can be.
Yeah, I love that. The concise part, I think, is so important because I can get off in storytelling and just go forever. And with humor and comedy, I always think of the 3 B's of public speaking or the 3 B's of comedy. Be brief, brother. It's just, the shorter the setup to a joke or the shorter a story could be, the more impact it's going to have.
Well, Mark Twain had that famous quote, if I'd had more time, I'd have written you a short letter.
Exactly. See, he was so good. Was he also the brevity is the soul of wit?
I think so.
Yes. I think so. Gosh, man, that Mark Twain thought of all of them.
But if you think of it in terms of business, typically if you're interviewing for a job, it's 1 year in the final 2 or 3. Same thing for a lot of architects, law firms, all kinds of companies. Fill out a proposal. You're in the final 3. Everybody gets a chance to come in and pitch. If you're telling a story that's concise enough that somebody could remember it for what I call the meeting after the meeting, and they've listened to all 3 pitches and they go, well, what'd you think? They all sound the same. I guess we should go with the cheapest. But if you're the one that told the story that's concise and compelling enough for them to remember it, they become your inside brand ambassadors. It's like, no, I think we should go with Paul because that story he told about ABC sounds like us. Then that's where storytelling helps you win sales.
Yeah, that's great because if you're the last 3, they've already vetted a bunch of others and you're in the final 3, then everybody's got great numbers or statistics. And we've increased revenue by this much or whatever. And they're not going to remember that. But you're right, that meeting after the meeting where it's like, oh, well, you know what, that story that John told about the Lifeguard, or I loved that story about painting over the masterpiece, like that really stuck with me. That's such a strong hook, an emotional hook. It's like this person, and they also feel like they know you a little bit because it's always a risk to hire someone to do anything. It's like, well, you look good on paper, your website looks nice, but it's like it's always a risk. You don't know if you're going to vibe with somebody.
Well, you have to, have a video of yourself speaking and testimonials. But then they typically interview you, and then it's just the vibe that they have. They said, you know what, I felt better after talking with you when I was interviewing you, and I figured if you could make me feel inspired, you could do the same thing for our audience. So sometimes it's just that energy. One of the things I like to look at is what problem am I solving? And one of the biggest problems people in sales have, again, whether you label yourself a salesperson or not, everyone deals with rejection. We get disappointed, we get discouraged, we get all the things that make us feel bad. But the trick is, how fast do we get back up after we're knocked down? So I came up with this 5-5-5 method. You ask yourself, I said, if somebody cuts you off in traffic, and I say, have you ever seen somebody lose their mind over that? And that usually gets a laugh. Because if you're not the person doing it, you've certainly seen your aunt, your uncle, some stranger just explode like they've been robbed or something. And talk about taking something personally. So I said, you ask yourself, will this matter 5 seconds from now, 5 hours from now, 5 days from now? And then I circle back. I go, if you're still obsessed about somebody cutting you off in traffic 5 days from now, you need to look at your life.
You need to seek professional mental health.
So that's how I'm incorporating humor into teaching somebody an actual usable takeaway. And you're like, so the people that perseverate on, we lost this past 5 days, and you're still talking about it 5 weeks or 5 months from now. You're not present for the next pitch. And so it's all about how fast you get back up after you get knocked down. Not, I never get knocked down. No, you're going to get rejection. So the secret is the 5-5-5 method, and then companies started sending it to each other, going, we need to 5-5-5 this. We're not going to talk about this anymore. And then I talk about it through a personal lens. Like when my dad died, I said, I wish I had that. 5 days, I was still devastated. But how about 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years? I could go back in my younger self and say, 5 years from now, you'll still miss him, but you won't be this sad.
Right.
So again, humor, sadness, it's the same side of the coin, right? So when you let people into how you feel or make them laugh, either way, you're making them feel something. And that's part of what I do.
Personally, for me, it's a great reminder right now. We just put our dog down yesterday. And so we're still in that. Thank you. But we're still in that, like, I see a picture of him and I'm like a mess. Like, but knowing, and having gone through it before, but knowing that like 5 days from now, it'll be, those tears will hopefully be some laughs and smiles.
Yeah.
And 5 months and 5 years, hopefully I'm still not bawling at the drop of one picture of him, But that's a good, I love that. Is this going to matter 5? And because we all have moments where we're taking our life too seriously. I mean, of course, your dad dying, my dog dying, those are serious, sad moments. But like someone cutting you off in traffic, or an abrupt email or something like that, or even a rejection letter or a rejection from a pitch or something. If we are still obsessing about these things constantly, for one, people don't want that negativity in their lives. No. They don't want you talking about that crap all the time. It's like, get over it, dude. And for two, you're right. It prevents us from moving forward.
Well, my friend James Mellon said to me when my dog died and I was crying, he said, let me ask you a question. If you knew you were going to feel this sad when you got your dog 10 years ago, would you still want your dog? And I said, yes.
Yeah.
He goes, there's your answer.
I'd go through the whole, in my case, 14 years over again.
Your life is your feelings are like a dimmer switch. Yep. You want to just go through life with minimum happiness or sadness. But if you're willing to have a lot of joy, sometimes you got to have the sadness with it. And that's fully alive. So I thought that perspective was helpful. Hopefully it'll help you.
I love that. But what I love about your 5-5-5 method too is that it's really a way to learn optimism, because people like people in sales, and I would argue comedians as well, can be some of the most optimistic people on the planet. And I think a lot of comedians and a lot of people in sales wouldn't identify themselves that way. But for anyone to get as many no's or as many bombs or, jokes that don't hit or whatever, and to then go back to the drawing board and go, all right, well, let's try that again. And let's try that again. That is optimism, man. That is like, I know that I can make this work.
I love it. Yeah. Yes, it's the resilience. How fast do we get back up? And therefore, we not take rejection personally, whether you're a comedian or a salesperson or whatever it is you're doing. Then you're free to create without attachment to the outcome.
Beautiful. Yeah. So what's your favorite thing about what you do in terms of your keynote speaking, working with sales groups?
I think my favorite thing to do is the actual doing of it. That moment where I've done all the preparation, I've interviewed some of the people in the audience, I really understand what their challenges are. I had this recently with Jack Link, those meat snacks that you see in 7-Eleven. So they had their big sales meeting, and I'd interviewed them about their challenges. Little things like the price of gas goes up, less people are going to the 7-Eleven or the Circle K. How do we combat? So we come up with a special flavor for them to have to get people to come to their store. I'm like, that's a creative solution to an outside problem that's beyond your control. Watching the audience come to life and take notes and laugh and participate and then exceed expectations, that is when I feel most fully alive and most fully present of this is what I love doing. More of this, please.
Yeah, it's such a good feeling too, when you've tapped in and you can see that you're actually helping some people with what it is that they love to do for a living. I mean, that's all you could ask for, right? Is to feel like the work you do lights people up and creates value. Yeah. Well, where can people find you? What's the best place to go if people want to look you up, have them come to your event?
My website is my name, John Livesay, Livesay.com. If you can't remember that, just Google the Pitch Whisperer and all my content shows up.
Okay, that's the last thing I wanted to know is the Pitch Whisperer. How did you get that? How did you get that name? That's such a good name. Yeah.
Well, I was interviewing with Anthem Insurance to be their keynote speaker, and they said to me, hey, have you done a lot of healthcare talks? And at that moment, I had not. Now I've done a lot. And I said, instead of directly answering that question, I said, I'm happy to answer that question, but first I want to ask, what's going to happen after I give the talk for the rest of the 2 days? And I said, oh, we're going to have an improvisation session. And people are going to go on stage, pretend to be the doctors, and somebody else will pretend to be Anthem, and the people are going to shout out objections from the audience, and we're going to, just have them improv how to answer that. And I said, oh, well, what if I stay after my keynote and whisper in people's ear something from the talk if they get stuck? Because improvisation is all about keeping a conversation going. Yes, and they said, oh, that'd be amazing. We'd love that. No one said, we hadn't even thought of that. And okay, you're hired. And suddenly nobody cared that I hadn't done 50 healthcare talks. And when I was being interviewed by Inc. magazine, I told them that story, and they were like, oh my God, you're the Pitch Whisperer. And I'm like, oh. And so I loved that so much, I trademarked it. Now people introduce me that way when I'm speaking, and people like, what's a horse whisperer, dog whisperer? We know what all that is. What the heck is a pitch whisperer? It's an intriguing thing. So that's become part of my brand.
It probably gets you a lot more traction than if you would have gone with like pitch please or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's such a cool story though.
It.
I love that. I love that story.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this, spending time with us. And again, johnlivesay.com if you want to check out his stuff. The link will be right there in the show notes. And wherever you're listening, please subscribe and follow. And it helps us out a lot. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Laugh or Death with Paul Ozenkup. If you're planning a conference or event and want something smart, meaningful, and actually funny, book Paul to speak. To learn more or to get a copy of his book, The Humor Habit, visit laughordeath.com.